We're all very excited to talk to you today. My name is Josie Thiel, and I serve as a policy analyst for the Texas Public Policy Foundation. We are honored to have 4 distinguished panelists with us here today to talk to you about workforce development issues. And at this time, I'd like to go through their bios for you to give you a brief introduction to each of them. To my right here is John Kufos. He is the National Director of Reentry Initiatives at Right on Crime and the Executive Director of the Safe Streets and Second Chances Project of TPPF. He was previously certified by the Supreme Court of New Jersey as a criminal trial attorney. In 2014, he helped build the New Jersey Reentry Corporation to assist Governor Chris Christie's efforts and innovation in the opioid crisis. After designing the program, John was named executive director and worked with the Christie administration and 5 former governors to implement effective evidence-based reentry services. He was also named one of New Jersey's top 40 under 40 in 2016 by NJBiz. To his right, we have Mike Reeser, who serves as the Chancellor and CEO of the Texas State Technical College, the only statewide 2-year technical college system. He previously served TSTC in various roles, including Chief Financial Officer, College President, and Dean of Instruction. Under Reeser's leadership, TSTC has become well known for the returned value funding formula, a state funding method based on the student employment outcomes and not on enrollment census, and the money-back guarantee, an employment assurance program that refunds tuition to students who can't find a job after earning a TSTC degree. Next, we have Joe Arnold, who is the Senior Manager for Government Affairs at BASF, which creates chemistry for a sustainable future. He previously served as chairman of the Public Affairs Committee for the Industry of Southeast Texas. Since 2009, he has spoken on the need for an educated and trained workforce with a focus on skilled crafts. He currently serves as chairman of the board for the Associated Chemical Industry of Texas, a member of the board for the Texas Chemical Council, an executive board member for the Texas Association of Manufacturers, and he chairs the workforce committees at the Texas Association of Manufacturers and the Texas Chemical Council. And finally, we have with us Brad Bailey, who is the Vice President of Government Relations and External Affairs at S&B Engineers and Constructors in Houston, Texas. The S&B family of companies is a leading provider of engineering, procurement, and construction services for a wide range of industries, including oil and gas, refining, petrochemical, infrastructure, pulp and paper, power, and industrial. From 2008 to 2013, Brad was elected to 3 terms as a city council member for the city of Nassau Bay in Texas. Before I turn things over to John Kufos to get us started, I'd like to give a little bit of information about why we're all here. The title of this panel, of course, is Middle Skills in High Demand, Prepping Students to Close the Gap. So what do we mean by middle skills gap? First, by most accounts, middle skills jobs are those that require more than a high school diploma but don't necessitate a full 4-year degree. This typically takes the form of workforce training, certification, apprenticeship programs, or 2-year degrees. So despite its reputation as a manufacturing powerhouse, a global player in the oil industry, and a beacon for personal income growth, Texas has a severe and rapidly growing economic problem, a gap in middle skills workers. To quantify this phenomenon, middle skills jobs account for 56% of the state's labor force, while only 42% of the state's workers are trained at the middle skill level. Further, there are far more low-skilled workers than there are available low-skilled jobs, highlighting the fact that there's significant untapped potential in the existing workforce. While this issue is significantly worse in the southern economy, this is not at all a Texas-centric problem, which you'll hear from one of our panelists today. Now, this all sounds really bad, and it is obviously severe, and if left alone, will have dire economic consequences. But lucky for all of us, there are brilliant minds working on this every day, and you're going to get to hear from 4 of them right now. So at this time, please welcome John Kufos.
Thank you, Josie, and good morning, everyone. Everyone can hear me okay? Okay. We also had to go New Jersey style without the microphone, but I'm glad we don't have to do that. It'd be profanity-laced and I'd be removed. But anyway, it's good to be with you all. Again, my name's John Kufos. I'm the National Director of Reentry Initiatives at Right on Crime here at TPPF. And part of what I do is help run the Safe Streets and Second Chances project, which I'll get to in a second. When we think about middle skills, right, this ties into everything that is right in America, everything that leads to prosperity in America, and about bringing equal opportunity although maybe not equal outcomes, but equal opportunity to all of our citizens. So a little about me. I spent about 10 years of my career as a criminal defense lawyer in New Jersey, a lot of gang cases, organized crime cases, etc. Life took me in a different direction, and I ended up running a one-stop career center, or an American Job Center, as some of you may know them as. And what I got to see there as I helped Governor Christie build a reentry program, a workforce-based reentry program, what I saw was a disconnect. I saw a government program that was essentially a black hole, right? You had federal labor dollars going to state departments of labor, being trickled down to workforce development areas for decentralized control, which is not a bad thing, except when they lead to training to nowhere pipelines. And what do I mean by that? In New Jersey, when I took over the One Stop Career Center in Jersey City, which is Hudson County, which is synonymous for the same level of corruption as Cook County, Chicago, right? We've perfected that in New Jersey. And when I got there with my colleague Shay Calley, who now also works at Right on Crime, we saw all of these vendors doing either a training to nowhere pipeline or industry recognized credentials that go nowhere. So what we did was we fired most of those vendors, lived to tell the story. I think only a gang lawyer could do that in New Jersey and live, right? So I invested heavily in bulletproof vests, probably manufactured in Texas, and somehow I made it through. But the important part, though, was that we were filling a gap, right, for folks who would not be able to get employment in other ways. So let's talk about barriers. We'll talk about threshold barriers, because I'm a firm believer, and someone much smarter than me once said, the greatest social welfare program in the world is a job, right? And it's our duty to get folks there. It's good for our economy. It's good for our people. For those of us working in the criminal justice space, it's good for public safety. I think we all want folks coming out of prison with felony records working, right? So, but what you realize is that the barriers to middle skills start at a very basic level for the very poor and the court involved. These folks don't have identification. They can't find their birth certificate. They don't have the money to get their birth certificate. And they'll have a myriad of interlocking fines and fees. I think you guys call it driver responsibility program down here. In New Jersey, they just call it fees. You get another tax that they would levy on us. So I moved to Washington, D.C., which actually is a step in the right direction for taxes. Tell you how bad my situation is. But in any event, you had to get folks I-9 ready, meaning if our employers in the room wanted to hire someone underemployed, unemployed, court involved, and you wanted to give them a job tomorrow, and they don't have any ID, you can't employ them. You're not allowed, right? They can't pass an I-9. You had barriers like that. You have barriers of housing. So in order to get someone to middle skills, you have to stabilize them, right? But the idea is the middle skills employment will help incentivize the poor, the largely minority communities, and the underemployed get where they need to go. So in New Jersey, what we ended up doing was I was pretty annoyed that I would see cranes everywhere as they build all over Jersey City, but none of the folks from our one-stop career center, American Job Center, on any of the jobs. And the unions controlled most of that in New Jersey, and they said, well, John, no one has any skills. I said, all right, well, how do I get them into the trade unions? And in New Jersey, it seems that, Walt Kowalski Jr. gets the job from Walt Kowalski Sr., who got it from great Walt Kowalski, right? There's no opportunity for folks who are trying to break in the unions. So they said, well, John, aside from training, nobody has a driver's license. So what I did was I said, well, what if we could get them driver's licenses? And what they said, well, you'll never have driver's licenses. You'll never be able to get these folks together, have them get their lives together to get any sorts of training. What my union buddies didn't know is I had 70 of my lawyer buddies organized to clear licenses. And we cleared 400 of them in the 3 years we were there. And the unions ended up making carpenter classes, laborer classes, and other building trade classes with just ex-offenders in them, right? So those folks went from parole to now making $70,000, $80,000 a year, some of them, with overtime. So how do we get them there? Well, the first thing I think we need to do are eliminate the government waste that we see in these programs. That's number one. Number one, we have to get rid of the waste. And how do we do that? We have to make sure that training vendors are compliant with the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, industry-recognized credential portion of that, meaning that the training to nowhere that leads to no credentials cannot occur any longer, right? That's the very first thing that has to happen. And the law says you have to do that, but it certainly doesn't seem to be implemented as well as it could be, right? The way you do that is you have to bring together partners that service the other needs of the population, the incredibly poor they're trying to get into these jobs. So just like, for those of you who've been in healthcare, in the healthcare system, as I have as well, I've worked in healthcare, and population health is all the rage, right? We understand if people eat better, they see the doctor less, right? We understand people see primary cares, they don't tax our emergency rooms. Same principle in employment, right? We have to handle those, help them handle those basics so they can achieve their prosperity. So we have to listen to our employers. I'm so excited to see employers here, to hear that great conversation this morning in the ballroom, right? Frequently what I see government doing around the country in the departments of labor is telling the employers, this is what we're giving you. And the employers are saying, well, that's not what I need, right? We need true P3, public-private partnerships that bring the employment community in to do two things. Number one, tap into ITAs, individualized training accounts. And number two, tap into OJT dollars, on-the-job training dollars. The thing I was most motivated to hear this morning was that you had a 17-week, fully paid training program, right? States around the country already have a smaller version of that called the on-the-job training program, but it's either given out to whoever might know the director of the One-Stop Career Center, or they're just not given out, right? These need to be utilized and planned by the employers. Next thing we need to do are look at things in Kaiser Permanente has done a great job of this nationally in the healthcare industry. What they've done is they've taken the underemployed and the unemployed, and they put them through healthcare-related apprenticeships. Now, of course, that's not for everybody, right? Not everybody is qualified will pass a background check to work in healthcare. Not everybody's appropriate for every job. But the idea is to bring these things out resonates with President Trump's executive order from last summer, where he wants to expand to 5 million apprenticeships during his term, right? So the will is there, but it's about bringing these partners together. So one of the more interesting parts of the story that I haven't touched is how do you go from representing organized crime in New Jersey to talking about workforce development? Well, I went to prison. In 2011, I was in the throes of alcoholism. Thank God I'm sober now. And I crashed my car and hurt someone drinking and driving. Thank God they lived. Thank God they recovered. Nothing I did helped that. And when I went to prison, I went to a general population prison. And I thought I knew everything about the criminal justice system in particular. You know, and I grew up poor, so I had a big chip on my shoulder. And I was amazed that while I walked the prison unit with largely black and brown faces, nobody asked me for money, which was actually good because I was going bankrupt at the time. But in prison, I had like $50. That's enough to buy chips. So no one asked me for money, though, but nearly everybody asked me for a job. When I say nearly everybody, I mean nearly everybody. John, can you help me get a job? John, I want to provide for my daughter, but I don't know any other way than what I do. Sometimes the first thing was, hey, I had to get sober. You need to go to drug treatment before some employers should take a risk on you, because you can't go on a job site and fall off a scaffolding and think anyone's going to hire you anymore because you're still high. That's important. And that's where middle skills training can fail, right? If we don't go ahead and make sure people are work ready, or at least training ready, before they get there, they're going to fail. And then the program will fail. So I get out of prison, and in a story uniquely New Jersey, I became in charge of a biometric security division of a corporation. So here I was on parole selling security equipment around the world, and I turned a company around. And if only they knew where they were buying it from, right? But in any event, I was able to stabilize myself economically there. But I didn't practice law any longer for obvious reasons, and I needed something for my soul. So I read about a fledgling reentry program in Jersey City, asked to volunteer, and to help people get their driver's licenses through my networks and things like that. And then from there, they put me in charge of a one-stop career center. Again, uniquely New Jersey. Figure Hudson County, New Jersey. He's like, I'll just put the felon in charge of the one-stop career center. It'll be business as usual. And I ended up making the most changes that had ever happened there. And then from there, Governor Christie took notice of my work and gave me the opportunity to lead. And I did that. And then from there, I was blessed again when Brooke Rollins, when she was the CEO of TPPF, signed that employment paper that brought me here to help the country. So I speak wearing a few hats. We're wearing a few suits, this fancy suit, and which isn't really fancy. It's just, I try to make it up nicely. I wore an orange jumpsuit in prison, and I'm proud to be here with you. And I'm proud that Texas is leading the way, both in criminal justice in so many ways. And being from a guy from New Jersey, it's tough to admit any place is doing anything better than New Jersey. So you got to know when I say, you know it's true. But I am so proud of you guys for being here, for taking the initiative here, and understanding that this level of workforce development, this middle skills development, this is one of the key prosperity issues of our time. Thank you.
At this time, we'll hear from Mike Reeser from Texas State Technical College.
Howdy, y'all. Good to be here. John, given John's background, I am dying for one of you during question and answer to ask him the burning question we are all wondering. After that last episode, whatever happened to Tony Soprano? Okay, will one of you guys ask that?
We have an answer.
Oh, good. So, Josie was right. The skills gap is real in Texas. It's bad, and it's getting worse. And if you run an industrial or a manufacturing or other companies that need skilled labor, you know all about it. And so we're going to talk some about that today. An interesting thing about it is that while this problem has been plaguing us for about 20 years, the number of students that Texas has been sending to college has been progressively growing. We're doing a great job of getting kids to go to college. So what's the rub here? Why do we have great paying jobs going unfilled if we're sending more kids to college? And in the next 9 minutes, we'll talk about that. But first, here's what we'll go over. A quick word on TSTC, which is the college system that I work with or at, the roots of the skills gap, and then some of those policy situations or implications. At your place is this book. It tells you more about TSTC than you would like to know. I hope after the session you'll take a chance to look at it. We are the workforce college system of Texas. We have 10 campuses across the state, and you heard Josie talk about some of the things that make us unique, like our outcomes-based funding formula. It's 100% of our state money comes from the employment outcomes of our students. And we offer money-back guarantee if you can't find a job. So let's talk about the roots of the skills gap. Back during the 60s and 70s, when we were looking at equal rights and civil rights, and we were asking ourselves, do all Americans have the same opportunities? The answer was no, and we started working on that. But one of the things that happened is the notion of college should be available to everyone morphed in the years since into everyone must attend university. And it became a kind of a cultural mantra. Everyone must attend university. Well, the problem with that is we don't have the jobs for 100% baccalaureate degrees in our population to fill. The next is, about the same time in the 80s, federal financial aid got converted into direct funding for students. And the problem that created is students began to get isolated from the total cost of higher ed because the actual payback for higher ed got kicked down the road into their professional life. And at the same time, the flip side of university for everybody was the middle skills became stigmatized. In fact, this, I'll give you a second to read this, kind of summarizes the whole thing. How did we get so crazy here to think that toga parties and fraternity keggers were going to make the difference in terms of our professional outcomes, and that was a preferred pathway to getting a great paying job? How did that happen? So it's no surprise that in Texas, like all the other states, because students were asking for academic pathways, the number of classes that we have taught in the two-year sector in Texas over the past 30 years has gone from a ratio of about 50-50 technical to academic down to about 25%. So as higher ed has grown, the growth has been on the academic side of the house, not on the technical side of the house. And it is those technical pathways that lead to these very lucrative middle skills jobs. At the same time, the cost of college has soared, and the students are isolated from that because of the student loan debt. In fact, these data show you that the cost of attendance at a four-year school has grown between 8 and 10 times faster than the average household income. Only healthcare rivals higher ed in terms of the costs. And in both cases, the consumer is isolated from those costs because you have either an insurance provider or you have a student loan system that isolates you from that total cost. Why is this happening? I will suggest to you this chart right here should be abolished from the face of the earth. And the reason is folks don't know how to read it. Regrettably, I saw a publication out of the state of Texas just last week that used this chart to argue for why you should go to college. Well, the problem with this chart is, here's the conclusions that a normal and reasonable person will draw from this, is that more education is always better, that any bachelor's degree or any master's degree is better than the degree below it, and that the best of all is go get a graduate degree, because then you're certain to get a great paying job. So the problem with averages is they don't show you the range of outcomes. And the reader doesn't know if all the outcomes are clustered around the mean or if they're spread out. So those conclusions, according to the data, are actually incorrect. None of those conclusions are true. So when we use averages, we mislead people about the facts of higher ed. Here's a better way to show students and their families and prospective college goers about the truth about college. In this case, the big blue bar in the middle of each outcome is the middle 50%. The top is that thin blue line on the top, and the bottom is results are those on the bottom. These are quartiles. So what this shows, if you really look at this, is that in that shaded area, consider associate degrees, bachelor's degrees, and master's. And again, middle skills jobs are earned with an associate degree or a college certificate or industry training. It's the one on the left. If you're in the bottom quartile of a master's degree, you don't have a prayer of making more than the top quartile of an associate degree. These are the hard data. At our office, we just hired a master's degree graduate who graduated from the university down the street, and she works for us now and has told us how thankful she is to have this job. She's our receptionist. Okay? So that's the reality is, if you looked at associate degrees and bachelor's degrees, you'd see that 91% of the four-year salaries overlap with 89% of the associate degrees. Here's the truth about college. It's not your length of program that determines how much you're going to make. It's your field of study. Study after study after study demonstrates that's the facts. That a STEM-related associate degree will out-earn a liberal arts degree in nearly every single circumstance, even if it's a master's degree in liberal arts. So here are the conclusions that this kind of whisker chart would bring you to, and that is each college option has a wide range of earnings possibilities, that some shorter options consistently outperform longer ones, and the notion that more education is always better is not true. That's the truth about college. So here's the problem. How come our kids don't know this? It's because those who influence the kids, the parents in the family, these are the three stakeholders that weigh in on college decision. Parents and family, teachers, counselors in the K-12 system, and their peers and classmates. That's who does it. We don't have any sort of way to get to them the information they need to make wise choices about college. We're trying, but it's not very effective right now. And all of us know that what's not working is market forces or job demand. Because you'll hear from some of our employers here, they have $80,000 and $100,000 jobs sitting fallow because they can't find the skills for it. If that's all it took is availability of jobs, then they would be finding the candidates for it. So from a policy standpoint, what does it imply for us? How are we doing? 2 minutes, okay. Too few students are opting in to these career and technical pathways. We all but eliminated shop class in high school years ago in the University for All effort, and only now with HB 5 are we beginning to add them back in. That's a good movement, and we're headed in the right direction. But that by itself isn't going to fix the stigma. We've got to find a way for families to know that is just as acceptable to go be an instrumentation tech at one of BASF's plants and make $80,000 or $100,000 with a 2-year credential as opposed to doing the keggers and the frat parties. And so we know too from a Texas standpoint, CTE is more expensive, these career and technicals. So support for community colleges and the technical colleges are gonna have to be looked at if what you want is to provide the skilled workforce for the Texas employers. The way to talk about kids in college is return on investment. What are you gonna spend? How long are you gonna spend it? How much will you end up in student loan debt? And what's the job certain that you're going to get out of that? And that'll help market forces work. What we know is employers will help us if they see well-conceived partnerships that will begin to address this. And a statewide coordinated plan would be essential for us to get that done because there's too many stakeholders involved. How many of you have college kids? Did you know the class of 2012, that's the one that I have the latest data for, 50% of the bachelor's degrees in the class of 2012 moved home when they were done. 50%. One of my kids did, but only because his apartment wasn't ready yet. But I will tell you, those of us who are older and remember that starting out of college was awfully good because there was a certain link between getting a bachelor's degree and getting a great paying job. That link is no longer true. Instead, in its place is a certain link between a program of study that is highly valued by employers of various college lengths and a job certain. Texas has got the early parts of the solution in place, and thanks to work by TPPF and others, we'll continue to make progress. Thank you.
Now, we're all particularly lucky today because on this panel, not only do we have the perspectives of those who are training individuals to get them into middle skills jobs, but we also have the other side of the picture, which is often overlooked, the employer side. So now at this time, you're going to hear from Joe Arnold, who serves as the Senior Manager for Government Affairs at BASF.
If you don't mind, I think I'll stay here. I have a few notes that I wanted to look at. Actually, I don't need to look at anything because he gave my presentation. We absolutely adore and love TSTC for all the things that they do. And I can't tell you how spot on he is with his presentation today. We do have a skills gap, and it is real. Over 56% of the jobs in Texas right now require middle skills. Projected out to 2024, over the next 5 years, you're going to see it about 50%. And I doubt you'll see it drop from there for the foreseeable future. 10, 20 years out from now, we'll still need that number. And if you look back, there was a time in America when about a third of the jobs available were for four-year degrees and above. About a third of the jobs were available for associate degrees, and about a third of the jobs just required a high school diploma or less. My, how that has shifted. When you have today about 16% of those jobs require a high school degree or less, 56% of those jobs require a middle skills training, which is an associate's degree or a certificate, and then only about 29 or 28% of those jobs require a four-year degree. I would propose to you today that we do have a middle skills gap, but we also have an interest gap, and that will build on, I'll build on what Mike was talking about. I'll give you a personal reflection. I have three boys, 31, 26, and 23. The 31-year-old went to Lamar Institute of Technology back in Beaumont, was hired away before he even got his associate's degree in technology, and today he works for the University of Texas as a system administrator with no degree. Isn't that ironic? My middle son decided he wanted to go to University of Texas in Arlington and study music. Quickly figured out that college wasn't for him, and he's still sort of floundering, looking for what he wants to do now. And he's at the age where dad knows a little bit. You know, you can tell kids, but you can't tell them much as a parent. My youngest graduated from Texas A&M in August with a degree in graphic design, and he's still looking for a job today, so he moved home and he's one of those. Now, he did know that he would need a master's degree to pursue the career that he wanted. He wants to be an art director at a large or maybe a small boutique advertising agency. That's what he wants to do. He was born with a natural skill. He's an artist. He's very good at it, so I don't blame him for that, but most of the skills that are out there are taught skills, and we need to learn those skills. We need to teach those skills to our kids and our grandkids and encourage them to find a skill that they can make money at. I mean, you go to today any Starbucks or other coffee shop in Austin, and you'll be waited on by someone with a bachelor's degree, master's, and I've even been waited on by someone with a PhD that was a barista at Starbucks. So when we're talking about the interest gap, we need to first look at ourselves in this room and decide what do we value. So how many of you today, and you don't have to raise your hands, but how many of you today would encourage your child or grandchild to look at anything other than a four-year degree as a path for a successful future? When at BASF, we hire a lot of engineers and attorneys and CPAs. We hire many, many more technicians. For each operating engineer that we hire at our Freeport facility, we have a need for 8 to 10 technicians to supplement that role for the engineer. It doesn't take long to do the math to see that these good paying jobs with good careers, I mean, they start out right out of school for us in these technician positions between $70,000 and $80,000. They can make $100,000 with overtime, you know, in their first year or two. And if they want to pursue an engineering degree, we'll pay for it. There's opportunity out there that we're letting, we're blind to it, and we're not looking at it, and we're not encouraging our children to look at the big picture. So we do have an interest gap, and I think it starts at home. If we're going to talk about policy, I think the thing that I would like to leave you with today, most of all, and where we could use the help from TPPF, is that we did a major change with our education system with House Bill 5. And we took the focus away from everybody needs a 4-year degree to everyone needs to learn a skill. And we gave a base foundation with endorsements. You can choose from endorsements from business and industry, public service. You can even do the CTE route, or you can go with the college prep route. It's all available to all children in Texas. So what we did there is set the foundation, but we can't let that be the only thing that we do. We need to encourage our legislators to continue to tweak the system and continue to put the focus where it needs to be, which is on CTE. With over 50% of the jobs that will be available over the next 5 years in Texas, and I don't look for that to drop very much, if any, after those 5 years, why does it make sense for us to continue to push kids for a 4-year degree or better? We need to make sure that they know the options that are available to them, and we need to make sure that we remove that stigma that unless you go get that 4-year college degree, university degree, you're not going to be a success. Tell that to the student that graduated at TSTC a few years ago as a welder and now has his own welding business and hires other welders and is a millionaire today because he's a good entrepreneur. Well, not everybody's going to go that route, but just to show you that there's success everywhere if we look for it. And we have to take that stigma out. One of the things that the Texas Workforce Commission has done to help us with that is create the Jobs Y'all campaign. And we need to embrace the Jobs Y'all campaign, and we need to take that further and talk about all of the jobs that are available in Texas to Texans and make sure that everyone looks down the road to see what their future could be, and not just assume that if I go to a 4-year university, I'm going to be successful in life. So the thing that I would leave you with is that we need to make sure that our policies reflect the needs of business and industry in Texas. It's an economic development issue for us. No more important, no less important than tax incentives to get us to locate our businesses here. No less important than water is to us to have a sustainable and affordable source for water to run our plants. All of these things are economic development issues, and they all work together to keep the economy of Texas strong and leading in the nation and the world. And we need to make sure that we step up to the plate and we continue to have effective policy for workforce and education in Texas. It's crucial. We cannot walk away from that.
Now, at this time, we'll hear from Brad Bailey, who serves as the Vice President of Government Relations and External Affairs at S&B Engineers and Constructors in Houston.
Thank you so much. I, too, am going to sit here if that's all right. And many of you heard my speech this morning, so I apologize if I kind of retread a bunch of that information. I'll try to break it up a bit. But S&B Engineers and Constructors is a family-owned engineering, procurement, and construction firm. We build major projects like oil refineries, petrochemical plants, $100+ million jobs up to $1.4 billion jobs. of recent, we have seen a tremendous amount of increase in our economy, and I think a lot of that's due to tax reform and regulatory reform. Just in the greater Houston area, I want to make sure I drive this point home. In the last 2 years, over $35 billion worth of projects are coming to oil and gas and petrochemical just in the Houston region. $35 billion. Many of these jobs have not even started yet. They're in the design phases and they haven't even broken dirt yet. So as you look at these, fake news economic models, a lot of that workforce is not in there yet. So let's not give up on tax reform. It's done a tremendous amount to open up business and projects to get funded. So a lot is coming down the pipeline. But getting the projects built is not the problem. Regulatory reforms helped, but the biggest concern that we have right now is workforce development, to have the skilled workforce to come in and build those plants. In our case, it's pipe fitters, it's welders, it's electricians, it's plumbers, it's millwrights, it's all these people that are technical skills that they got to have. They got to be NCCER certified is the accreditation that we use, and finding those are more and more difficult because the economy is where it is right now, and the current book of business that we have signed, sealed, and delivered right now. We have to hire 3,000 more craftspeople this year to meet the projects that we've got commitments to. 3,000. That's incredible. We're doubling the size of our skilled labor talent right now. What are we doing to that? We're looking at every option possible, and I'll talk a little bit about our Women's in Construction Apprenticeship Program. But we're at a point right now where we're going to have to hire Filipino welders to come in. We're going to have to pay a tremendous amount of money to bring them in, to come in. We're going to have to pay like a headhunter fee guy. We've got to put them up in housing accredited by Department of Homeland Security and Department of Labor, and we have to bring them in because we don't have enough people to do it. So thank God there's schools like the Technical State Technical College that is helping address this issue. We need everyone on the playing field, but also businesses have also got to have the ability to adapt and be able to have their own training modules or apprenticeship programs that you have, so they can actually be on the job working and training side by side with their mentors that they're going to be working with from here on out. And that's what we really did. We came up in 2005 with a workforce development apprenticeship program, and we targeted women. Why women, you might ask? Well, we found that women are much more loyal, they're not going to job hop like men, and they got a lot more greater attention to detail. And they're a lot more conservative. So they're not going to jump a job for 50 cents to $1. They're more worried about the long term and how that's going to affect their family. So that's really important to us in our line of business. The 17-week program is a true P3. It's a public-private partnership where we partner with the state of Texas and the Texas Workforce Commission and the United Way. We go through the Texas Workforce Commission's unemployment logs and we find women that meet our criteria that we give the United Way. The United Way then can come in and ask employment questions and qualifications that as an employer, I can't ask. Legally, I cannot ask. But the United Way being a nonprofit, they can. We whittle those down. We start off usually with around 6,000 people that fit our criteria. We bring them in for interviews. 2,000 don't show up. Maybe 2,000 show up. We have strict drug policies. You've got to have a TWIC card, which is a Department of Homeland Security card that you pass. That's way tougher than E-Verify. We have E-Verify as well, but you cannot be illegal and work in our job site. So that takes off a few more people. But what we're looking for, and I'll be honest with you to break it down, is an 8th grade reading education and an 8th grade math education. If you have those two, we can train you to be a welder or pipe fitter. But we train that class down, get them about around 20 people that we bring in and that make the final cut. A lot of them kind of drop off because they realize the amount of work that it's going to take to get through the 17 weeks. But and that's a whole other issue that we've got. That's a whole other panel. We've got a work ethic problem in our country right now. Major work ethic problem. I blame video games, but that's just me. But I really do believe that this program, when they come in, it's an earn while you learn. We pay them $17 an hour, and we give them 50 hours a week. We give them 10 hours overtime because we need them that bad. They earn that. We have the United Way comes in. Now we have child care being able to provide it for them. We have tools being given to them when they join the thing, a full set of tools that they'll need on the job. We have gas cards. We give them $200 in gas cards upon coming so they can get to and from work. I mean, a lot of these women have children at home, and it's a tough thing to do. We've got to be a little bit more flexible with them also, because if a kid gets sick and there's no dad at home, what's that mom supposed to do? So we've really had to do some deep reflection in that. But because we're able to do that, we get a tremendously loyal workforce. Tremendously loyal workforce. Once they do that 17 weeks, they get life skills training. I mean, simple stuff, how to open up a checking account. You know, how to pay off your bad debt. You know, how to have conflict resolution. You just can't start throwing stuff and getting mad if someone says something wrong. How to, personal finances and so on. This is critically important for them to kind of get that basis. We then take them through the classroom, through modules. We've got a training facility that we actually show. We have on site where they're able to weld in the elements and pipe fitting and that. They go into the plants and start working with mentors side by side, shoulder to shoulder. Once they finish that is graduation, and we guarantee them a full-time job on one of our projects that we're working on. That full-time job bumps them up to about $23 to $25 an hour, and they immediately start making $60,000 a year. So you literally have someone in 17 weeks go from being unemployed, depressed, without options, to in 17 weeks making $60,000 a year, having full benefits, having the same exact benefits as I do and the owners of our company has, 401k, all of that, and they have hope, and they have dreams, and they can do things that they've never been able to do before. We just had a graduation ceremony in December, and I mean, it's so moving when you see a mother come up and put a kid on my owner's lap and say, "You changed my life, you changed my whole family's life." That's power. That's making a difference. And there's so many people that get discounted that are on unemployment rolls, that can't keep a job. And I think there's people in our party, we do a bad job at just discounting them off, saying they want to be a government drain. I can tell you I've come face to face with a lot of them, that's not the case. They want a job, they want hope, they want dreams, but we've got to give them the opportunity. And I believe the Texas Public Policy Foundation is the perfect organization to do this. And here's why we have decided at SMB to fund the Right on Work Policy Center. We looked at what they did on Right on Crime, and it blew us away. But Right on Crime, there's a lot of things, and John talked about it, that go hand in hand with work. Mentor programs and apprenticeships in prisons where we can train them to be welders and pipe fitters in the way that we do things, and then we can become their sponsor when they get out. I went to Angola prison and saw this happen firsthand. And these people are coming out, they have jobs lined up, they're members of churches when they get out, and the chances of getting rebooked in jail or caught on another crime is less than 7% at this prison. And it's one of the toughest prisons in America. So we have opportunities to roll out here in Texas, but we've got to start thinking outside the box. And this work issue, it goes across so many policy centers that TPPF are already experts on. So this Right on Work Policy Center that we launched this morning, it's critically important that we get industry involved, that we start having this conversation of how we can fund this and get other companies to take on what we have done. It's not easy for companies to do what we've done. We're a little bit bigger of a company, but I believe the state, we can promote policies that give us the ability to come out with programs like that, to give businesses the ability to train and to do higher, reentry programs and such. We have a tremendous opportunity in the state. We're getting ready to launch our Veterans Apprenticeship Program that we're launching here in about a week. And we're working with another nonprofit on bringing veterans in, men and women. The Trump administration has been great on this. They have took notice of what we've done. Ivanka Trump came down to our training facility. She didn't want any cameras. She didn't want anything. She came down and wanted to just kind of learn more about it. She was blown away with what we're doing. She invited 2 of our women to the White House in October to come up and talk and personally tell their story to the president at an event in the East Room. These ladies were blown away. 17 weeks ago, they were unemployed, couldn't pay their bills, barely could buy food for their children, and there they are at the East Wing of the White House, 16 weeks later, telling the president about what they're doing. It's critically important that we look at new options and new opportunities, and I believe TPPF Right on Work is just the group to do that. Thank you.
before we open up for Q&A here, I ask that you all join me in giving a big round of applause for our panelists. These guys have been so generous in their time and their talents on this issue, and we are all very thankful for what you do. So with that, if we have Graham in the back. Does anybody have any questions? Graham, right up here.
Chancellor Reeser, you and I work closely together on policy discussions at the Capitol, and one thing that I hear often is a misunderstanding of your return value, your commission rate funding formula. Can you just describe that for a few minutes and make sure that everybody understands exactly what that is?
Back in 2009, the legislature asked all of higher ed, would anybody be interested in doing outcomes-based funding? And as an organization that had 50 years of track record in terms of putting people to work, we raised our hand and said, we'll do that. And so we worked for a couple years with folks designated by the legislature, the coordinating board, the comptroller's office, TWC, and the Ray Marshall Workforce Center over at UT. And we developed an approach that pays TSTC's public funding based on the employment outcomes of the students. And here's how that looks, is the co-board tracks all the students that attend TSTC. Once they leave TSTC, the co-board turns to the database kept by the Workforce Commission that captures most of the employees in Texas. It's part of the federally mandated unemployment insurance database. They compare our graduates with that database, and then they capture for 5 years the earnings of our former students. Those earnings are compared to minimum wage, and the difference between minimum wage and what our graduates actually earn is considered the value add provided by the TSTC certificate, and we're paid essentially a commission based on that aggregate add. And that's how and what makes it unusual and jaw-dropping for a lot in our sector is 100% of our formula funding is subject to that.
And Mike, let me tell you what that does for business. That means that all of the courses that they teach match up with what we hire, and that's not by accident. They seek us out and they ask us, what are you going to be hiring for? What can we train for you? So for business, what better formula to have at a school that's providing you with future employees than to come and ask you what is it that you need. It's a really novel idea when you think about it, because that's not been what's been going on in the state of Texas or across the nation for the last 30 years. So it's very refreshing to us and something we support wholly, and we hope that the legislature actually funds you to the full level of your funding in this next budget cycle. It's very important to us.
It's a paradigm shift. The budgeting process in Texas assumes the notion that higher ed funding is a cost recovery system, one in which the legislature returns some of the expense of higher ed to the institutions. And so seasonal variations up and down depending on the session or something that we've all come to live with. Our approach is straight commission. I mean, if we were a salesperson, for example, this is like going from straight salary to 100% commission. And so the system is designed to provide an economic incentive for us to waste nothing and get the maximum yield out of the taxpayers' money by producing the skills that the employers in Texas actually need. So that's caused us to cancel tons of programs. We don't do what the basket weaving programs anymore. Over the years, we have gotten to where our average starting salary has soared. The aggregate has soared, and it's because of the economic incentive. However, the legislature will need to learn in the years ahead to be more disciplined in the way they pay the commission, because if you don't pay the full commission, you'll actually turn the formula into a disincentive.
And if I can just pick up on one small point here, where you get trained matters, right? I think that's what we're hearing, right? I mean, I would love to see programs like this all over the country. And, we heard earlier about NCCER certification. I have a bunch of them, right? I got them in prison. I got them in electrical trades. If I tried to change that light bulb, I'd probably burn the building down, right? All they did in prison was give you a book, a self-study, and obviously I have a halfway decent brain to take a test. I got through law school, right? So I took a test. I have all these certificates. They sit all over the place. And I have all these NCCER certifications that are completely meaningless. In the 11 months I was in electrical trades and have these certifications, I never touched a wire in the New Jersey Department of Corrections. But hey, I got a bunch of certifications. I can try to get a job, right? And then obviously poison the employment pool and probably kill somebody in the process. Now, I bring that up because what we're hearing today is something unique and something that the rest of the nation should look at and replicate, and something the state of Texas needs to expand, where we're listening to employers, we're training to what they want with reputable and respectable institutions.
We talk a lot about accountability. There's no higher form of accountability for a graduate than a job.
Amen.
And if you can't supply that graduate with a job, you're doing a graduate a disservice.
And Chancellor, I'll tell you this. Let me ask you this, because I'm very interested in this. If you take all the higher ed universities across Texas, community colleges, four-year colleges, how many of the chancellors would agree to the funding thing that you just went through, where it's performance-based funding that equals jobs?
So here's one of the blessings that TSTC has. I may surprise you with this answer. Here's one of the blessings that TSTC has is we have a very narrow mission. Our mission is solely produce a skilled workforce and focus on the needs of Texas industry. That's all we have to do. Here's what we don't have to do. Prepare kids for transfer to university. Do fine arts. Do liberal arts. Do any of the other cultural offerings that make a society rich. We are not obligated to do any of that. In fact, we're told not to. So this funding formula is ideal for TSTC because we only teach for the workplace. If I were a community college chancellor, I would have a much broader mission. I would have a bit of research. I would have, a bit of community development. I would have all kinds of other things that I have to do. So here's what we've learned about accountability is, if you want to invoke accountability into higher ed, start with the intended mission of the institution and then link the money to what it is you're asking them to accomplish. And for that reason, this formula might do well for some of the workforce programs that others in the higher ed sector do. For example, it would work great in law school. It'd work great in medical school. It'd work in engineering. It'd work in business. But it's going to really struggle in things like sociology or anthropology or things like that, because those scholarly endeavors have a different purpose in our culture.
Yep.
So my point is, start with what you want the school to do and link the funding to that. But don't think that you could take our approach and apply it to everyone.
That's fair.
Graham, get right up here, Graham.
Thank you. My name is Mary, and I'm from Atascosa County. I have just come from a panel discussion from educators who are focusing in poverty school districts, and they're focusing on getting every kid to college. And so how does, and then I come in here.
Is it college or university?
Well, community colleges too.
Okay.
They're looking at that as well. But I think they were saying 4-year degree. Does that?
Probably were, yeah.
And so how do we reconcile what you're saying with what the TEA is focusing on? Because they seem to be mutually exclusive.
That's what
Anybody want to take that? Yes.
that's why I was saying, as a matter of policy, we cannot let that continue. I mean, you saw the data, you saw what we're needing out of a workforce in the coming future. Need it now, and we're going to need it for a long time. We cannot let policy drive that. We need to make sure that we turn that around. We also have to make sure that we change a mindset. This is not something, when we started on House Bill 5 and started talking about, I've been talking about this since 2009, it's going to take more than a generation to turn this around. So we have to continue to put value where value is, and that's in all of the education system. And if you look back at that chart that Mike showed us just a moment ago, you can find that value in a four-year university. You can also find that value in community college, and that's what we need to talk about, is the value of the job that you go and look for. You ask somebody in high school right now, what are you going to study when you leave here? They don't know. They don't know what they want to be. So we have to do a better job at making sure they know, starting way back in kindergarten, talking about education as it relates to your future and the jobs that you want and the skills that you have.
Let me add on that if I could. When Commissioner Morath first became commissioner at the TEA, we went to see him and because of the natural affinity. And he's an internet entrepreneur. He's built and sold a couple software companies, so he knows what it means to hire skilled labor. And one of the things I was really impressed with the commissioner was he said, you know, it's going to take a while, but what I want to make sure is in Texas public high schools, the CTE that we delivered is relevant to the jobs in our state. And he convinced me he's serious about that. So it starts with leadership, and you've got someone with the right attitude. In the time since, moving the big TEA away from that academic-only attitude to one in which CTE is an acceptable alternative for a lot of kids has been monumental. He's actually moved it faster than I thought he would. This fall, for example, TEA convened a meeting with over 200 employers in Texas and used some software package that TSTC developed for curriculum alignment, and used that software package to use industry input to inform the next version of Texas CTE curriculum. So there's some good things going on there. And of course, the entire HB5 and endorsement system is really good. Here's the problem in poor neighborhoods or neighborhoods of historically underrepresented kids is there was a time when technical ed was reserved for the brown kids and the black kids, and the white kids went to university. Now that was a long time ago, but as a society, our reaction to we need to make university accessible to everyone meant that we got kind of overly sensitive to the idea of sending minority kids to a CTE track because we were accused of tracking. We were accused of continuing to perpetuate the old notion that the minority kids would be the trades and that the white kids would be the engineers. We are finally at a place in our culture where it's okay for a kid from a poor or moderate income family to pick either track. The real headwinds we have are in the mindsets of the adults that surround these kids.
All right, I think we have time for one more question before we wrap things up. Graham, get right up here, Graham.
Meg Wilson, I have a slightly different kind of question. What role do unions play in supporting or opposing mid-level skill development in the various industries that we have real jobs in Texas?
I mean, I guess being from New Jersey, right? I guess I should start this. The unions have have nearly all the power in my old home state. They have an almost unlimited ability to restrict who enters and who doesn't, and they have no incentive to partner with any community providers or any educational institution other than whatever they want to do for themselves. And I don't say that, and I say that, I know it sounds like a really bad way of saying it, but it's been going on so long there. And then interestingly enough, the thing that brought parity to the field were tax abatements. So what happens is in New Jersey, any public project above a certain amount has to use union labor. Any private project that receives a tax abatement of a certain amount has to use union labor. So there started being cutouts and carve-outs for people in the community. So if you're thinking of a place like Jersey City, the only folks in Jersey City who are going to who would be subject to the tax abatement, meaning the jobs cutout, are going to be people who are poor. And in Jersey City, that means almost all minority. That complicated governmental overreach, in my opinion, is the only way we were even able to open the door. And then when we had that door open and there was a law for them to do it, they still tried to say, well, John, no one has a driver's license and all the things we talked about before. So at least in New Jersey and other heavily unionized states like that, there's a problem. But I'll tell you, there's some good people in the union, because when you could find folks in the unions that believe in the mission, as I set out to do in New Jersey and in other places where we have this problem, we're able to get folks, sort of en masse into the unions, 20, 30 at a clip from these, from different communities. So I think that's something that at least what I've seen around the country, it's been a barrier, but it's a convertible barrier.
Let me piggyback on that. You asked what role they play. On the federal level, a tremendous amount. The unions, until 2 years ago, owned the word apprenticeship. The only way you could get funding, federal funding or grants or that, was basically to be a union or associated with a union in some way, somehow. So they're very effective at the Department of Labor. The swamp is big there. So they have really been able to kind of hijack that issue. Things are changing a little bit, opening up, and I think actually unions are embracing it. They're realizing that it's opening up the pool of workers versus them trying to own their own little area. So thank God we're a right-to-work state here in Texas and don't have that issue. But I would say that the other way the union's affected, I think, are sometimes in higher ed little worlds of saying, everyone, kind of the elitist, everyone has to go to college type mentality, when that's not the case. We've got a tremendous, our country was built on the backs of blue-collar labor that we desperately need to tap into again.
So in Texas, compared to New Jersey, the influence they have is small compared to New Jersey. There are a few trades in this state that are highly influenced by unions, and they work closely with the licensing department of the state to ensure that that influence is maintained. There could be some loosening in that area that would provide us with a bigger pool of talent. But generally speaking, that's a small exception to the vast array of middle skills opportunities that are out there.
Thank you all so much for joining us today. And at this time, we ask that you head over to the Governor's Ballroom for the closing luncheon keynote with Senators Ted Cruz and John Cornyn.